Good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you might be. My name is Kevin Michael Grace, and this is the KMG show for Monday, July the 25th, 2022. I'm going to start off today by talking about Viktor Orban of Hungary, who apparently does not want the Hungarian people to disappear. And this is a controversial view. It's from Natalie Korach at Mediaite. During an address delivered in Romania Saturday, Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban, who is scheduled to headline CPAC in Dallas next month, blasted Western European nations on immigration policy, arguing that Hungarians want to avoid race mixing. We are not a mixed race, and we do not want to become a mixed race either, stated Orban. He added, "We mix within Europe, but Hungarians do not want to become a multi-ethnic group," Orban claimed, speaking on behalf of his nation. The Hungarian Prime Minister idealized an unmixed Hungarian race during his speech, while also arguing that Europeans should avoid mixing with non-Europeans. Orban has targeted immigration from Africa and the Middle East, restricting the right to seek asylum in Hungary, along with placing barriers around the borders of the country. These remarks come after the recent announcement of Orban's headlining gig at CPAC, America's most influential conservative political conference. In May, Orban gave the keynote address at CPAC Hungary, just following a video message from Fox News' Tucker Carlson. The Hungarian Prime Minister recently won election for his fourth term in office. Meanwhile, he's become a media focus of the American conservative right by way of his autocratic tactics and nationalist policy. Boo! Prior to Orban's re-election in April, former President Donald Trump endorsed him in his bid for his fourth term, lauding the prime minister for doing a wonderful job. Orban has also served as an ally of Russian President Vladimir Putin throughout his tenure. In his Saturday speech, the prime minister touched on Russia's war in Ukraine, arguing that Russian-U.S. peace talks are the only possible solution. Very, very controversial. President of Hungary does not want the Hungarian people to disappear. And here's a story by Taylor Simone Mitchell at Business Insider. The authoritarian leader regards Putin as an ally and was endorsed by Trump. Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. The conservative prime minister argued that the West is split in two. Half, he said, are countries where European and non-European people intermingle. Those countries are no longer nations, he said. He did not name any specific nations, but pointed to Western Europe. He also said that the countries where Europeans and non-Europeans intermingle continue to fight Central Europe to change us to be like them. In a spiritual sense, the West has moved to Central Europe, he added. Again, oh, so very controversial. And there is an article at Unheard, a rather more thoughtful piece by Aris Roussinos called "Viktor Orban Sees a Decade of Dangers Ahead." On Saturday, Hungary's recently re-elected leader, Viktor Orban, gave another one of his showpiece speeches in neighboring Transylvania, reviving what has become an annual tradition after a 2-year COVID hiatus. While much of the foreign coverage naturally focused on his emphatic rejection of both Western Europe's racial heterogeneity and Western sanctions against Russia, the most interesting part of the speech, its stark geopolitical content, has received far less attention. Orban observed, quote, "The general feeling is that the world is steadily deteriorating. The tone of the news is getting ever darker, and there is a kind of doomsday view of the future that is growing in the strength. The decade that has now opened up before us is clearly going to be a decade of dangers, of uncertainty and wars. We have entered an age of dangers, and the pillars of Western civilization, once thought unshakable, are cracking," unquote. American power is in steep decline, he observed, citing Africa and Asia's refusal to take Ukraine's side and boycott Russian energy. He commented, "This ability that the Americans used to have of getting everyone on the right side of the world and of history, and then the world obeying them, is something which has now disappeared. It may well be that this war will be the one that demonstrably puts an end to that form of Western ascendancy, which has been able to employ various means to create world unity against certain actors on a particular chosen issue. A multipolar world order is now knocking on our door, unquote. For Europe, unable to grasp the opportunities of a multipolar order and still dependent on the United States, the chance to shape these historic shifts in its favor is slipping away. We Europeans have squandered our chance to influence events, Orban claimed, by failing to enforce the 2014 Minsk peace agreement between Russia and Ukraine, so that now the situation is like the one after the Second World War. Europe once again finds itself in a situation in which it will not have a say in its most important security issue, which will once again be decided by the Americans and the Russians. Citing slow progress on EU enlargement into the Balkans and the inability to deal with Bosnian political dysfunction, Orban claimed that the reason that Europe cannot become a world political player is that it cannot keep its own house in order. The aim should not to be a world political player, but should be setting and achieving the modest goal of being able to settle foreign policy issues arising in its own backyard. What solutions does Orban offer? Boasting that right now we are implementing major developments in our army and military industrial sector and are diversifying our energy sources so that soon Hungary will be the world's third largest electric battery producer. He observed that by 2030, Hungary will, along with the rest of Central Europe, be a net contributor to EU budgets, meaning that this means that there will be a new power dynamics. He who pays the piper calls the tune, unquote. Setting out his stall for a rich and powerful Central Europe in an unstable multipolar world in which America's star is fading, while that of the great Asian empires rises, Orban's speech addressing the shifting tectonic plates of the global order head on. The opposite of a Western triumphalist, Orban conjured up a Spenglerian vision of a Western order in terminal decline. The continent's most controversial leader is now also its longest serving. If the great survivor is correct, the coming decade will see a poorer, weaker Europe struggle to survive the dawning age of empires. So Viktor Orban has a lot of fans in the right wing in the United States and in other countries, and this sets a lot of people's teeth on edge. For instance, Andrew Sullivan laying down the law on Twitter. It seems to me that every American supporter of Viktor Orban should be asked if he or she agrees with Viktor Orban that The Camp of the Saints is an outstanding book. I've honestly never read a fouler piece of visceral racism and anti-Catholicism. Scott Greer commented the book's author was a devout Catholic. Dr. Benjamin Braddock said, to be fair, the book does attack the Catholics that need to be attacked, one of its many strong suits. If you've read The Camp of the Saints, the author condemns the leadership of the Catholic Church for basically turning its back on Europe. That, no, we don't want to be thought mean. So if the rest of the world invades Europe, we're just going to have to invite these good people in because, diversity is our greatest strength. Let's go to the chat. And hello to Anrun, Adan, Emmett Kelly's Earth, who says, good evening, sir. In chat, did Biden really eat all of his broccoli? Hello to Dawn from Beyond, Palcasso 88. Anrun says, Kevin, thank you. Thanks for bringing Theater Thursday and the book club back. Hello to Brian Frakes. Palcasso 88 notes that Full Frontal with Samantha Bee has been canceled. Emmett Kelly's Earth says, Magyarization all of the way. Buddy says, hello, Kevin. Summer baseball season finito. Palcasso 88 says, R.I.P. Paul Sorvino and David Warner. Of course, I like both of those actors, especially David Warner. He was kind of a matinee idol in England in the 1960s. He made a very strange movie, which is now a cult movie called Morgan, or A Suitable Case for Treatment. Dawn from Beyond says, I'm temporarily unemployed. My work from home temp job is over, and I refuse to even consider doing DoorDash again. Now I'll see if it's true that there is plenty of work out there. Hello to Halper. Yeah, I'm having this problem with Twitter. When I make my lists for Music Monday, the book club, and Theater Thursday, I make my list and then I add a picture illustrating it. And I keep getting this error message saying, oh, you're allowed one GIF or up to 4 photos. Well, I've been doing this for years, 3 photos in one tweet thread, and I kept getting the error message. And I cleared out the cache and I restarted my computer and I restarted Twitter. And today I was going to illustrate Music Monday with a picture of Emmett Rhodes, and Twitter was telling me, nope, I had put, you're only allowed 1 GIF or 4 pics. Well, I hadn't even had a single pic up, and it wouldn't let me do that. Buddy says, do you like Jimmy Buffett? No. And are parrot heads a mystery to? Yes, they are. If you've ever seen Yacht Rock, who is it? Michael McDonald. It kills a whole bunch of parrot heads in a riot. And what's the he had a hit single with a black singer, James, I can't remember his last name, and he points out that he killed a lot of people, and Michael McDonald says they weren't people, they were Jimmy Buffett fans. Enron says, I watched an episode of Wonder Woman the other day. Acting was not Ms. Carter's strength. Emmett Kelly's Earth says, Viktor Orban, the Admiral Horthy of our day. Sadly, Ms. Carter's Twitter feed takes her down a few pegs on the scale, says Buddy. She's very woke now, isn't she? Linda Carter was going to be one of the Playboy bunnies in Apocalypse Now, says Halper. Colleen Camp, who was in Smile, she was in that movie, wasn't she? Colleen Camp, the Queen of the Bees. And hear me out, but was Barbara Billingsley attractive in a certain way, says Buddy. She was a good-looking woman. She was certainly never, sexualized on Leave It to Beaver, because Leave It to Beaver was a show, for children. It's a very interesting show. The 2 creators, one of them Jewish, one of them Catholic. And, they said outright that we're not doing this show for big laughs, for yucks. It was, observational. All of the stupid things that little boys do. Let's see. Warner was very good as the lead in The Bofors Gun, a well-acted but very dated movie from the late 60s, says Anne Run. And he was very good, of course, playing the idiot in Straw Dogs. Mrs. Cleaver was such a pleasant woman, says Buddy. Indeed, she was. I enjoyed Warner in The Omen very much, says Dan. But he says he's read Camp of the Saints 6 times. Have you been following the Joyce Carol Oates blow up on Twitter, says Philip Daniel. Hello, Philip. I haven't. What was she? Is she furious about something different now? I mean, that she wouldn't mention Donald Trump's name? She thought that this somehow gave her some great power. She's bonkers. Let me go to her Twitter feed. Okay, what do we got here? So cat posting. Yes, the usual career of most literary writers is to remain in obscurity for years. Then, if one is lucky, and it is luck, there may be a breakthrough. With Roth and Mailer, their enormous success came immediately, and then they were attacked and insulted and thrown on the defensive. Was Norman Mailer ever thrown on the defensive? When he socked Gore Vidal in the jaw, Joe Sobran sent a note to William Buckley saying, Buckley talks, Mailer acts. So no, I'm not. Demagogues are taken up as pawns of the wealthy and powerful who prefer to remain behind scenes. Without this cocoon of quasi-secret support, Trump, she doesn't spell out his name, could not have been elected. As with Hitler, So with Trump, unfortunately, Trump failed utterly in his clumsy attempt at force. The very person who was president of Princeton U had to flee Princeton because the eating clubs had defeated him. And in 2021, the university removed his name from the School of International Studies. Oh, so she's not going to mention the name of Woodrow Wilson either. Oh, my. Oh, my. What a silly woman. Oh, so you may have heard that Pope Francis, or anti-Pope Francis, is in doing an apology tour of Canada. And of course, Pope Benedict apologized for residential schools or for any harm that they had caused, but that wasn't enough. The Pope had to come to Canada and grovel and grovel and grovel some more. The typical story from CNN, it took 3 people to write this: Hira Humian, Lindsay Isaac, and Paula Newton. The Pope went to Canada to apologize. For some Indigenous school survivors, he triggered more pain. Oh, dear. Do you know that there's a new category of people in Canada, well, it's fairly recent, called residential school survivors. It's Holocaust envy. So you don't have to have actually gone to a residential school to be a Holocaust survivor. If your father or grandfather or whatever went, then you get to be considered a residential school survivor as well. And it begins with a unsupported allegation against a 92-year-old priest who has been charged with indecent assault. There is no possible way that this man could get a fair trial after 60 years unless we've devolved to the point of simply putting people in prison based on unsupported claims. Pope Francis himself arrived in Canada this week with a singular purpose: to apologize on Canadian soil directly and personally to Indigenous peoples for the Catholic Church's role in the government-funded residential school system. In particular, the trip, which the Pope himself has called penance, recognizes the damage done to Indigenous children who were taken from their families, banned from using their language, forced to abandon their culture, and in many cases abused physically, sexually, and emotionally. Kneel down the way you made us. Kneel down as little kids and ask for that forgiveness, McIntosh said of the Pope. For all his sins, Pope Francis had absolutely nothing to do with the residential school system, which was finished, by what, about 1965? But he loves apologizing. Of course, going back several popes, it's just been apology there, here, apology there. Apologies for what? The Crusades, apologies for everything. Another typical an article in the Toronto Star that, again, we learn that, yes, apologies, it's not enough. Apology is simply not enough. What do they want? Gibs. More endless gibs. Endless gibs for the pain, the horror of being alive. This is by Alex Bishop in the Star, who is described as a father to 2 and provides advisory services to women and Indigenous-led companies. So he has a pecuniary interest in this. Canada can apologize. We have apologized for falling short on environmental policy. What does that mean? On slowing the spread of COVID-19 and the rate of drug overdose, on Indigenous reconciliation after decades of displacement, cultural genocide, and the gulag-like realities at residential schools, on bigotries, religious and sexual, on wage gaps, racial and gendered. However long this list may be, it is painful all the more. Canada mustn't simply apologize. Now we must aspire to be better, genuinely, insightfully. Shame is not enough. Trying is not enough. Apologies are not enough. Enough is enough. Decisively, we must change to restore our national pride. Journeying from shame to pride, healthy and well-earned, is possible like any journey through earnest effort and action, and that action steers us away from apologies and toward amends. Well, anybody who claimed to be at a residential school and claimed to suffer abuse there of whatever kind got tens of thousands of dollars each from the federal government. But again, not enough. Those thoughts, those experiences are those of reckoning with a pattern of addiction. Much about my past is colored by shame, but also by the 12-step process by which I overcame it. No promise, even in good faith, was enough if it was the same promise and it met with the same result. Apologies were not enough if they came not from remorse, but as thought-terminating cliches, semantic stop signs in dysfunctional relationships, preventing meaningful discussion or action. You're right, I messed up. Why are you still angry? I'm sorry that you feel that way. I was hurting people. Friedrich Nietzsche said that a strong enough why could overcome any how. Probably not the first name one associates with the humbling experience of rehab. Oh, yes, it's all about you. It's all about, we trot out Martin Luther King, who, as I will point out, was a plagiarist, an orgiast, and an aider and abetter of rape. He ends, you will forgive me for channeling Aaron Sorkin from The West Wing. No, I'm not going to forgive you for that, Alex Bishop. This is a time when Canadians of privilege, by embracing a change towards sacrifice and service, may become the new breed of heroes, not just to Canadians who lack, but to Canadians who seek a national pride that rests upon national virtue. Yes, when I was a child, I was told that Canadian history was boring. So there's no point reading it. Canadian history is not, in fact, boring. But I was a boy and I needed heroes and found that there were plenty of heroes still then in the United States of America. Now we've gone from Canadian history being boring to Canadian history being a long series of atrocities, which apparently have not ended to this day. And of course, the Pope apologizing for the very idea of residential schools is indicative of how the Catholic Church has simply abandoned evangelizing. It is considered wicked now to try and convert people. And of course, we know from the lips of Jesus Christ himself that we are commanded to convert all the nations. But, I suppose the theologians know better than Jesus these days. Oh, let's talk about anomalies in the ground. Yeah, mass graves. No evidence whatsoever, and they're not going to do any excavations because that would be disrespectful. So they can continue to lie about these mass graves and get away with it because, they have suffered so very much. And I suppose, one feels powerful in compelling the head of the Catholic Church to fly halfway around the world and grovel and then grovel some more. And here we go. Oh, yeah. Let's talk about the Ukraine. Just the chutzpah of these people. Apparently, President Zelensky now believes that he's not merely the president of the Ukraine, he's also president of the world. Unheard asks, why has the Ukrainian government placed Glenn Greenwald, Edward Litvak, Tulsi Gabbard, John Mearsheimer, and others on a blacklist? Oh, a blacklist. So is the Ukrainian government going to get these people banned? This is from Finn McRedmond at Unheard. The Center for Countering Disinformation, established in 2021 under Vladimir Zelensky and headed by former lawyer Paulina Lysenko. Ooh, Lysenko, yeah, that's a name that one certainly associates with truth. Sits within the National Security and Defense Council of Ukraine. Its stated aim is to detect and counter propaganda and destructive disinformation, and to prevent the manipulation of public opinion. Was it several months ago that the New York Times printed an essay talking up the noble lie? Yes, the Ukraine was lied about Snake Island and the ghost of Kiev, but this is good, because people need myths. I suppose you could consider that to be disinformation. On July the 14th, it published on its website a list of politicians, academics, activists that are promoting Russian propaganda, including several high profile Western intellectuals and politicians: Republican Senator Rand Paul, former Democrat Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard, military and geopolitical analyst Edward Luttwak, realist political scientist John Mearsheimer, and heterodox journalist Glenn Greenwald were all included on the list. The list does not explain what the consequences are for anyone mentioned. Well, I don't know. You don't want to get on the wrong side of world leader pretend Vladimir Zelensky. The exact criteria for inclusion are also unclear, though next to each name, the report lists the so-called pro-Russian opinions the individual promotes. For example, Edward Luttwak's breach was to suggest that referendums should be held in the Donetsk and Luhansk regions. Mearsheimer's breach is recorded as him saying that, quote, NATO has been in Ukraine since 2014 and that NATO provoked Putin, unquote. The relevant intellectuals were surprised and concerned to be included on a government blacklist in this way. Unheard contacted Luttwak, an occasional contributor, Mearsheimer, and Greenwald for comment. Luttwak strongly rejects being labeled a Putin acolyte. From 24th February, day one of the war, he told Unheard he has relentlessly argued that not just the US, UK, Norway, and others should send weapons to Ukraine, but also the reluctant trio of France, Germany, and Italy. I have personally lobbied defense ministers of NATO countries to send more weapons as part of the war effort. I am not exactly Putin's most faithful agent. What happened is this. I said that there is a victory party, and the victory party is not realistic. Their idea is if Russia can be squarely defeated, then Putin will fall. But this is also the moment when nuclear escalation becomes a feasibility. It is a fantasy to believe Russia can be squarely defeated in Kyiv. They have interpreted this stance as meaning I am pro-Russia, unquote. Mearsheimer said, when I was a young boy, my mother taught me that when others can't beat your arguments with facts and logic, they smear you. That is what is going on here. I argue that it is clear from the available evidence that Russia invaded Ukraine because the United States and its European allies were determined to make Ukraine a Western bulwark on Russia's border, which Moscow saw as an existential threat. Ukrainians of all persuasions reject my argument, instead blame Vladimir Putin, who is said to have been bent on conquering Ukraine and making it part of a greater Russia. But there is no evidence in the public record to support that claim, which creates real problems for both Kyiv and the West. So what do they do with me? The answer, of course, is to label me a Russian propagandist, which I am not, unquote. Glenn Greenwald said war proponents in the West and other functionaries of Western security state agencies have used the same tactics for decades to demonize anyone questioning the foreign policy of the US and NATO. Chief among them, going back to the start of the Cold War, is accusing any dissidents of spreading Russian propaganda or otherwise serving the Kremlin. That's all this is from the Ukrainians, just standard McCarthyite idiocy. Who else is on this list? Graham Fuller, Jens Jorgen Nielsen, Ray McGovern, Jim Jatras. This is really a list of honor. Someone from China, Wang Wen, Dr. Wang Wen, Jay Naidu. Who else? It's a long list. Long list. Most of these names are unfamiliar to me. Let's see if I can find any familiar names. There's Luttwak. Oh, Doug Bandow. He's with the Cato Institute, I believe. Eric Zemmour is on the list. Scott Ritter is on the list. And Scott Ritter was right about weapons of mass destruction. And those who told us that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction were liars. Somehow Scott Ritter has yet to be rehabilitated and remains, as they used to say in the Soviet Union, a former person. Okay, that's enough. Jeffrey Sachs is on the list, and Douglas McGregor. But as I say, it's a long list, and I'm not going to go through the whole thing. Let's go back to the chat. Patrick Stewart said David Warner played the best Hamlet he'd ever seen, says Palcasso88. Don Willis says Mrs. Cleaver was more than pleasant, lovely, at home, cooking, cleaning, a string of pearls, waiting on the master ward to arrive home to his castle, a dream woman. Don from Beyond says, I'm a pothead, and even I don't like Jimmy Buffett. There's another bit in that Yacht Rock about Jimmy Buffett where he's written a film script, and it's called Cheeseburger in Paradise, with cheeseburger misspelled. Who else do we have? Kevin, I watched the Elgar doc you suggested, and you were right. It is just lovely. That's from Oscar Toe. Yes, Ken Russell made an hour-long documentary about Edward Elgar for the BBC back in the 60s. I didn't know that Mailer hit Vidal. Good for him, but it would have been better if Vidal hit him back, says Anne Run. Women's Libbers went after Norman Mailer in the 1970s. I seem to recall a controversial appearance on, what was the Dick Cavett show? Che Blutarsky, hello, says the only David Warners I've actually seen are Time Bandits and The Man with Two Brains. I've seen little bits of Tron and The Omen. Don't know what that says about me. I saw Tron when it came out. Boy, that movie gave me a headache. I just, everything was like black light. And I just, after a while, I just would just have to turn away from the screen because I thought my head was going to split. Philip Daniels is speaking of music. I've been looking into Schoenberg's Berlin pupils like Roberto Gerhardt, Nikos Stalkatas, Norbert von Hannenheim. Some of the work is very interesting, not what you'd expect. Parrot heads. Yeah, it's funny. I'm going to go back to Yacht Rock, that I think the idea is the parrot heads can be saved, and they can be turned on to the glory of, rock music. And so they play, rock music for them, and suddenly they're transformed. Their stupid clothing is gone, and the women become much more attractive. If you've never seen Yacht Rock, you can find it on YouTube. It's absolutely hilarious. Don Willis says, confession, I really prefer thin bacon. Taco Girl has been on some quest to find the world's perfect thick bacon. At this point, I'm ready for the old regular thin and crispy type. Just put more in. Anne of Cleves fan spotted in the chat, says Anran. Oscar Toe says Elgar's marriage was really the ideal. They brought out the best in each other. She was one of his students, and she was the daughter of a major general. And when she converted to Catholicism to marry Elgar, she was disinherited by her family. What is Cleveland's baseball team called now? As Oscar Toe, I believe they're called the Guardians. Is that some sort of attempted Marvel tie-in? And of course, what are the Washington Redskins called now? Something stupid. KMG, you need to try harder to get on Zelensky's list, says Emmett Kelly's Earth. Guardians of what? Asks Halpert. Lake Erie, maybe? Mailer was a bit silly with his JFK worship. Superman goes to the supermarket. I have never read a Mailer book, says Oscar Toe. He was a two-fisted writer. Two-fisted. Remember that sitcom Coach? They made a joke about Cleveland being a shithole, and they were forced to apologize on air. This guy on YouTube, what was it, 15 years ago or 20 years ago? He made a couple of satirical Cleveland tourist videos and just showing what the river that caught on fire and, the one hip street in Cleveland. But the big joke was they ended each video with, "We're not Detroit." They got that going on for them. Emmett Kelly's Earth says a major general, like out of the Pirates of Penzance. Yeah, it's a very modern major general. And let's get back to the news. This is from the Wall Street Journal. Russia to cut Europe's gas flow via Nord Stream by 20%. Gazprom blames problems with a turbine. The German economy ministry says there is no technical reason for a reduction. Russia said it would further reduce natural gas supplies to Europe this week, lobbying another volley in its economic war with the West and raising new questions about Europe's ability to avoid shutting down factories and leaving homes cold this winter. Russian state-owned energy producer Gazprom says gas exports through the vital Nord Stream pipeline to Germany would drop to about a fifth of the pipe's capacity, blaming sanctions-related problems with turbines that have already reduced flows. The fresh reduction in the pipeline's capacity from 40% currently to 20% is expected to take effect Wednesday, Gazprom said. Wholesale European gas prices jumped 12% Monday to 179 euros, or about $183 a megawatt hour. They have more than doubled so far this year and are expected by analysts to keep rising as winter approaches, adding to inflation that is straining economies, governments, and financial markets in the region. European officials and analysts say Russia President Vladimir Putin is weaponizing gas deliveries. Oh dear. Aiming to retaliate for economic sanctions imposed on Russia and weaken the West's resolve to give military and financial assistance to Ukraine. So the West effectively declares war on Russia, and the seizure of assets has always been regarded as a casus belli. And oh my God, Russia is fighting back. They're not supposed to fight back. They're supposed to, beg for forgiveness? And sure, why don't you chop up our country into 10 new countries and reduce Russia to, the size of Italy? Because that plan is being floated. But no, we're also shocked that Putin doesn't just roll up and die. And the latest from there, this is from Susie Bland of the Associated Press. Russia's top diplomat said Moscow's overarching goal in Ukraine is to free its people from its, quote, unacceptable regime, expressing the Kremlin's war aims in some of the bluntest terms yet, as its forces pummel the country with artillery barrages and airstrikes. The remark from Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov comes amid Ukraine's efforts to resume grain exports from its Black Sea ports, something that would help ease global food shortages under a new deal tested by a Russian strike on Odessa over the weekend. Speaking to envoys at an Arab League summit in Cairo Sunday, Lavrov accused Kyiv and its Western allies of spouting propaganda intended to ensure that Ukraine becomes the eternal enemy of Russia. And, there's a lot of people, including on that Ukrainian list, who insist that they are not cheering for Putin to win this war. I am cheering for Putin to win this war, and I don't care who knows. It's a vile regime. This is from Moon of Alabama. Another crazy plot by a Ukrainian secret service just blew up. Flimsy excuses follow. In May 2018, the Ukrainian Secret Security Service, SBU, faked the murder of the Russian journalist Arkady Babchenko in Kyiv for very questionable reasons. The murder had been first blamed on Russia. The SBU claimed that by faking the murder, they would uncover a real Russian murderer, which made no sense. It later turned out that the whole thing was part of a corporate raid. The staged murder with a fake cadaver, a fake killer, and a fake operator behind it was endorsed at the highest levels of the Ukrainian government. Western media used the hoax to accuse and defame Russia and its president without the slightest supporting evidence. That alone is already a serious mess and reveals the utter failure of Western journalism and media. The background of the case, a takeover of a company by illegal means, demonstrates the total social failure of the Western coup in Ukraine. The worst of the worst, robber barons like Poroshenko and criminal bankers like Kolomoisky went on to steal billions of Western aid while the Ukrainian state fell apart. Defying the courts, the power of the state is secretly abused for slapstick-worthy plots to grab up industrial assets. In August 2000, there was another crazy SBU plot, which within a month later unraveled. On August 7th, we reported how the Ukrainian intelligence service SBU, in the guise of a private military company, hired former Russian and Ukrainian soldiers allegedly for jobs in Venezuela. All the hired men had previously fought on the Russian side of the Ukrainian civil war in the Donbass. The men were told to go to the Belarusian capital Minsk, from where they were supposed to be later flown to Venezuela to guard oil installations. The Ukrainian SBU then told the Belarusian security service, KGB, that the Russian mercenaries, who were then waiting in a resort near Minsk, were in Belarus to overthrow its president, Lukashenko. The men were arrested, and Lukashenko made a public fuss about the alleged Russian coup against him. Ukraine then asked for the extradition of the men. It had plans to indict them for involvement in the Donbass war. But just a few days later, after the men were arrested, the whole plan unraveled. Russian media proved without doubt that the men had been tricked to go to Belarus and that they had no plans to overthrow Lukashenko. The Belarusian president apologized, and the men were returned to Russia. Today, we learn about another crazy Ukrainian plot. The Russian news agency TASS reports on it. It shows excerpts from Telegram chats, maps, and flight plans, as well as a recording of the plotters talking with one pilot. The basic story has been confirmed by Christo Grozev, who works for the British disinformation service Bellingcat as lead Russia investigator. But Grozev is giving the story a very different slant. Today, FSB announced they have foiled a plot by Ukraine's intelligence services to lure Russian military pilots to surrender to Ukraine with their planes in return for millions of United States dollars. Using a traditional mix of forged evidence and loosely interpreted facts, the FSB also accused me personally of being involved in the plane hijacking plot, which is true. What is true, however, is that I was involved in this crazier than fiction story of triple agents, fake passports, and faux girlfriends as a documentary filmmaker. Yes, we were chronicling one of the wackiest counter intel operations of all time, and the doc is still on. As I have said, if universal dishonesty could be monetized, the Ukraine would be the richest country on earth. And let's take a look at Summit News. What does Rand Paul say? There's going to come a day of reckoning. People will rise up. Appearing on Hannity, Senator Paul spoke of the Democrats' double standards on political violence in the wake of an attack on GOP Representative Lee Zeldin last week during a campaign speech. The left wing is egging this on, Paul urged, adding, and if we want to end this, we have to start locking people up. Paul compared the media coverage of the attack on Zeldin to how the media covered Paul being violently attacked a few years ago, noting that the Louisville Courier reportedly said that violence against me was justified. Paul went on to decry the rise of crime and violence, noting there's going to come a day of reckoning where the people who live in New York City, crime disproportionately affects those in poor neighborhoods and those who are minorities. One day they're going to rise up and say, we've had enough. The Democrats are not protecting our children. Kids are dying at the bus stop. Kids are dying on the subway. The Democrats don't care about your kids. And it continues to happen decade after decade. Of course, one wonders, if these people are so eager for change, why they keep electing the same sort of people. Here is Jim Kunstler's column for today, which is called The Wrecking Crew Will Be Overcome. We stumble into the hoarse latitudes of summer, feeling trapped in the stillness. The heat disorders minds, and these are minds already scrambled by official propaganda. We are this close to a general recognition that the COVID vaccines were, something unfavorable. Even while Rochelle Walensky of the CDC keeps pushing boosters on TV, and the entire public health bureaucracy stands by silently. When their trials finally come, will they plead that they just didn't know? How is that possible? It's not. The crisis of the vaccinated is coming, and there won't be any hiding it. Anyway, nobody expects actual news reporting out of the legacy media. It will get around through the alt media for sure, and already is, But the real spread will proceed when all the everyday people see themselves and those around them get sick and realize they have one thing in common: those vaccines they submitted to. In keeping with the principles of mass formation psychosis, the maliciously insane people in charge of our nation's affairs will expect you to swallow ever greater absurdities to maintain their control and protect themselves. But we're way beyond the women with penises stage. Nobody with a functioning brain believes the BS anymore, except the people who run the California prison system. Joe Biden has sent troops from the 82nd and 101st Airborne Divisions to Europe, supposedly to train the NATO forces of Euroland. Is this some kind of bluff? Or does Joe Biden and company imagine that they'll pull off some blitzkrieg counteroffensive on the ground in Ukraine and recapture territory secured by Russia painfully since February? If we send troops into Ukraine proper, it would amount to a deliberate sacrifice of our supposedly best soldiers in a meat grinder. Maybe the purpose is simply to further weaken the U.S. military, humiliate NATO, and hasten the death of the West. Of course, we have no real strategic national interest in Ukraine. We had no quarrel all the years that the Russian Soviets owned and operated it. We set in motion the current conflict by cooking up the 2014 color revolution. There followed the fat years for Hunter Biden, converting U.S. aid money into revenue for his many shell corporations. I doubt that a plurality of Americans will fall for another such stupid hate Russia ploy. We've had enough pointless and costly foreign misadventures. This would be a war exceeding the unpopularity of Vietnam and could easily unleash widespread street protests. Only this time, the left will be pro-war and the party of chaos will send out its ragtag army of Antifa trannies to make the street protests bloodier. It will be seen for what it is, the ruling regime's war on its own people, and it will be overcome. Vying in the absurdity Olympics, the World Health Organization just declared monkeypox a public health emergency of international concern, PHEIC, but only after the outfit's chief, Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, overruled a WHO committee that voted against such a move. Monkeypox, you understand, is a disease spread almost exclusively among the gay population, that is, men having sex with men. Outbreaks have been key to gay orgies, especially during the recent Pride Month festivities. Do you think it might be more appropriate for the WHO to issue an advisory against gay orgies? But really, it's just another obvious power grab, an attempt by the Schwaben-Clausian maniacs to push people around and wreck the economy in order to build back better. That is, to orchestrate a program of severe digital social control for managing its depopulation event. The U.S. Department of Defense is now authorized under the 2022 National Defense Authorization Act to administer a mandatory vaccine program, while the CDC has bought millions of doses of supposed monkeypox vaccine. Knowing how, I can't repeat this, do you really think that masses of Americans who happen not to engage in gay sex might line up willingly for these new shots? I kind of doubt it. The idiotic war provocations, the renewed climate hysteria, and dishonest health scares are devices for postponing, canceling, or screwing around with the U.S. midterm election. If the left loses the U.S. Congress, then the globalists will lose their main weapon, the party of chaos. Meanwhile, Euroland leaders are already falling, and whole governments over there will crash and burn in the months to come. And Kunstler concludes, all of this is happening against the background of a wobbling financial system that is making life unaffordable for what's left of the middle class. One way or another, they will be sharply motivated to rescue their own livelihoods and recreate a country under real rule of law in the service of liberty. We await Joe Biden and company's most desperate move to turn off the internet so that Americans won't be able to communicate easily or remain informed about anything. Of course, if they try that, they'll also destroy everything that is managed automatically by computers in this land and plunge America into battle against the demented bureaucracy that rules us. Oh, so what's the latest from Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez? According to the New York Post, Bruce Golding, she blames crime surge on child tax credit ending, calls Congress a shit show. The firebrand socialist ignored the fact that a thriving nationwide black market in stolen baby formula was documented more than 5 years ago, and that the item was being pilfered from city stores long before the tax credit expired, with cops calling it a favorite of the alleged man of steel shoplifter Isaac Rodriguez, who racked up at least 46 arrests last year. And she complained about her salary, which is only $174,000 a year. And she was miserable when she was a waitress and bartender. And I'm not going to repeat her words because they're disgusting. It's called a job, you know. And she thinks about walking away from politics all the time. I don't believe that for a second. She's famous and thirsty. What would she do if she was not in politics? Be a very sad day for her when she actually finally does leave politics. This is from Jerry Dunleavy at the Washington Examiner. The FBI's investigation into Hunter Biden was wrongly labeled verified evidence as disinformation, agency whistleblowers claimed. Agents investigating President Joe Biden's son opened an assessment which was used by an FBI headquarters team to improperly discredit negative Hunter Biden information as disinformation and caused investigative activity to cease, according to Senator Chuck Grassley, Republican of Iowa. Grassley revealed the claim after his office received a significant number of protected communications from highly creditable whistleblowers about the investigation. The Republican claimed one of the communications shows verified and verifiable derogatory information on Hunter Biden was falsely labeled as disinformation. And we all know why this happened, because it points up to the man at the top. Paula Berlinski says the island of Java is 48,000 square miles and has a population of 149 million people. Florida is 53,000 square miles and has 21.5 million people. And yet I'm told that Florida is overpopulated. Art Mob says, Kevin, tremendous to listen to the entire Enigma variations from the BBC. Link you posted. Thank you. Well, thank you for your kind words. Who else? There are already several great dance remixes sampling AOC's big juicy booty comment, says my trail of a disgrace. Anybody new here? I wouldn't want to live in a place as crowded as Java. My Trail of Disgrace says Rocket from the Tombs, Pre-Ubu, and Dead Boys Band, also amazing, especially considering that most of their original recordings are either demos or live stuff. The news media has been singing demand for shots outpaces doses available, re monkeypox, says Dawn Willis. The Dems won't lose control of both houses. They might not even lose one, Jim, says Anran. Yeah, we'll see. I mean, if you were listening to my show on Friday, Jim Kunstler trotted out a very dark scenario of what might happen in November. Paula Berlinski quotes Dostoevsky, tolerance will reach such a level that intelligent people will be banned from thinking so as not to offend the imbeciles. Halper says 50 viewers and 3 Per Ubu fans among them. Amazing. I am a Per Ubu fan myself. Ruslan Akhmatov says bathhouses should be shut down by force. Seinfeld was on Benson for 4 episodes and then was fired. Don't know why, says Palcasso 88. He talks about this. I think that in his when he interviews Jay Leno, we find out that Jay Leno has never had a cup of coffee, and Seinfeld makes him taste it, and he's just disgusted. I can't drink this. And he says that he used to do the Merv Griffin show, and that a whole bunch of shows were filmed in advance. And so when Merv Griffin is introducing him for the first time, he said, and now you all will know him from Frankie on Benson. Jerry Seinfeld in the audience, what? Frankie on Benson? Well, the episodes of Benson that Seinfeld was on hadn't aired yet. pretty funny. Going back to what I was saying about comedy supposedly being about pain. So Seinfeld asked Jay Leno what was the worst gig he ever did, and he said that he played a Playboy club in New York City, and he said there wasn't one laugh, not one laugh during his entire performance. And later on, he found out that the audience was made up of Portuguese tourists that had been bussed in. And so back in those days, if you played a Playboy club, you would get graded on how well you did. And so the fellow in charge of this told Jay Leno that he was going to give him an F. And I said, these are Portuguese tourists. I don't speak Portuguese. I don't care. I'm still giving you an F. And you could see that Jay Leno was still angry about this. And Seinfeld said, did you get paid? And Leno says, yeah. And he says, well, quit your bitching. My trail of disgrace, says Rip Torn and Mailer got into it, including a hammer and ear biting during filming of Maidstone, I think it's called. Can't remember now if this was method stuff that got out of control or something else going on. Yes, I've read about that, and I've seen pictures. It looks absolutely terrifying. Rip Torn was a strong man. Yeah, and that movie is let's ramp everyone up to levels of violence, and let's just get the cameras rolling, see what happens. Alrighty. What about Mitch Ure? Ask Anrun. Oscar Toe says men project their own issues onto women a lot of the time. Not that women don't have their own. And yeah. Hey, you know what's happening in the Netherlands? How about we bring that to Canada? How about we destroy Canada's agriculture industry, which will go along really nicely with destroying the oil, gas, and mining industries. This is by Brian Lilly at the Toronto Sun. Provincial agriculture ministers are expressing frustration with the Trudeau government over plans to effectively reduce fertilizer use by Canada's farmers in the name of fighting climate change. The federal government is looking to impose a requirement to reduce nitrous oxide emissions from fertilizers, saying it is a greenhouse gas contributing to climate change. While the Trudeau government says they want a 30% reduction in emissions, not fertilizer, farm producer groups say that at this point, reducing nitrous oxide emissions can't be done without reducing fertilizer use. You may have heard of the Green Revolution. The Green Revolution is intensification of agriculture so that Asia and Africa weren't starving anymore. And now we've decided that the Green Revolution was a bad idea. And as George Monbiot, has it, agriculture is evil and agriculture must be ended. Speaking of European collapse, Thomas Fazzi has a piece at Unheard. Mario Draghi's defenestration has left the Italian and indeed international establishment reeling in horror. This is not surprising. When he was nominated as Italy's prime minister at the beginning of last year, Europe's political and economic elites welcomed his arrival as a miracle. Virtually every party in the Italian parliament, including the two formerly populist parties that won the elections in 2018, the Five Star Movement and the League, offered their support. The tone of the discussion was captured well by the powerful governor of the Campania region, Vincenzo De Luca, who compared Draghi to Christ himself. Everyone agreed a Draghi government would be a blessing for the country, a final opportunity to redeem its sins and make Italy great again. Draghi, they said, simply by virtue of his charisma, competence, intelligence, and international clout, would keep bond markets at bay, enact much-needed reforms, and relaunch Italy's stagnant economy. Alas, reality hasn't exactly lived up to expectations. Draghi leaves behind a country in tatters. The latest European Commission macroeconomic forecast predicted that Italy will experience the slowest economic growth in the bloc next year at just 0.9%, owing to a decline in consumer spending due to rising prices and lower business investment, a result of rising borrowing and energy costs, as well as disruptions in the supply of Russian gas. Italy is also experiencing one of the fastest growing inflation rates in Europe, which is currently at 8.6%, the highest level in more than 3 decades. Interest rates on Italian government bonds have also been steadily climbing ever since Draghi came to power, rising fourfold under his watch. Today, they stand at the highest level in almost a decade. And this poly-crisis has taken its toll on Italian society. 5.6 million Italians, almost 10% of the population, including 1.4 million minors, currently live in absolute poverty, the highest level on record. Many of these are in work, and that number is bound to increase as real wages in Italy continue to fall at the highest pace in the bloc. Meanwhile, almost 100,000 small and medium enterprises are at risk of insolvency, a 2% increase compared to last year. So much for Super Mario then. Oh, so this fellow has a lot of charisma, and that's how you solve problems with charisma? I'm going to talk about baseball in just a minute, but a remarkable story from ABC News. I so wish the case hadn't been settled. 1989 Central Park jogger believes more than one person attacked her. New York City settled with the Central Park Five in 2014 for $41 million. Mayor de Blasio said they spent a lot of their times in jail and prison wrongly. We have an obligation to turn the page. We have an obligation to do something fair for them, for the whole city to turn the page and move forward. Yes, these rapists became rich for mass raping a woman. And we know the truth about what happened at Central Park. And you can read it. Ann Coulter has written about it extensively. I believe you can find that on VDare. And also Nicholas Sticks covered the story quite well. It's just a tremendous scandal, you know. Here's a piece by a column by Ann Coulter. The plaintiffs in the Central Park jogger case in 1989 are demanding $50 million apiece for going to prison for rape that they committed, as detailed in Chapter 13 of Demonic, How the Liberal Mob is Destroying America. The Central Park Five, as PBS documentarian Ken Burns has dubbed them, aren't exactly Emmett Till, as Burns would have you believe. Even if they were innocent of the Central Park rape, which they aren't, the reason they were originally arrested was that they were rampaging through the park, assaulting people. While denying the rape, the defendants admit committing these other attacks. How'd you like to be one of the people badly beaten in the park that night, watching your tax dollars go to pay your assailants millions of dollars? But all their convictions for the rape as well as the assaults have been vacated because an aging district attorney wanted a glowing obituary in the New York Times. In 2002, the ancient Robert Morgenthau, Manhattan district attorney, issued a report recommending that the convictions in the Central Park rape case be vacated. Judge Charles Tejada, a Fordham Law 2009 Hispanic Heritage Award winner, granted his request. Liberals are opposed to rape in the abstract, but when it comes to actual rapists, they're all for them. The DA's report was based solely on the confession of Matthias Reyes, career criminal, serial rapist, and murderer. Reyes had absolutely nothing to lose by confessing to the rape. The statute of limitations had run, and much to gain by claiming he acted alone. He got a favorable prison transfer and the admiration of his fellow inmates for smearing the police. While dumping on the police for screwing up the investigation, Morgenthau wouldn't let the cops interview Reyes themselves, despite the fact that his confession, or so-called confession, constituted the sole evidence that he raped and brutalized the jogger by himself. Not only were the police prohibited from interviewing Reyes or giving him a polygraph, Morgenthau ordered other inmates not to talk to any police investigators about their own conversations with Reyes. First, the DA slimed the cops, then he ran interference for a rapist murderer. New York journalist Nicholas Sticks reports that one inmate says Reyes told him he heard the jogger's screams and raped her only after the Central Park Five had finished with her. This woman was beaten almost to death. Yes, after my show ended on Friday, and when I got something to eat, I turned on a Blue Jays game, and it said the score was 23-3, and I thought that's an error. 23 runs, and it was in the fourth or fifth inning. And so the final score was 28-5. But something remarkable happened during the game, that Raimel Tapia hit an inside the park grand slam. So it would seem that the outfielder, whose name was Duran, that he lost the ball in the sky. Like, there was twilight in Boston. The ball landed about 30 feet behind him, and he just stood there as if the game was over. I've never seen anything like that in 60 years of watching baseball games, that eventually what the left fielder had to come all the way from the other side to pick up the ball at the wall and threw it to the cutoff man, and grand slam inside the park, home run. I was reminded watching this. Oh, first of all, let's see some excuses here. I just lost it in the twilight, Jaron Duran said. It's the most helpless feeling you could ever feel. As for why he didn't hustle to get the ball when he noticed where it landed, Duran said left fielder Alex Verdugo was closer to the ball and he didn't want to get in the way. Dougie was right there already. He said, obviously, I should have taken a step or two, but he was already going to beat me to the ball, so I just didn't want to get in his way. What if I sprinted and collided with him or something like that? But next time, I know to take one or two steps. But he was already going to beat me to the ball. So here he confesses that he's just going to fake it in the future if that ever happens. And if you watch you can find this inside the park home run on YouTube and many other places. And the camera pans the Red Sox dugout, and one of the Red Sox players, just the look on his face, just total disgust. And I was reminded of the famous contretemps between Carlton Fisk and Deion Sanders. Deion Sanders, like Bo, was a two-sport player, baseball and football. And so Neon Deion he was the hottest thing in baseball, the hottest thing in sports. And he rubbed Carlton Fisk, the catcher of the Chicago White Sox, the wrong way. That when he first came to the plate, he drew a $sign in the dirt with his bat, and then he had a weak pop out, and he just sort of ambled into the dugout, and Carlton Fisk was furious. Carlton Fisk hated the Yankees because he played for the Red Sox for so many years. But, I mean, the New York Yankees is the most celebrated team in all of sports. And, you wear the pinstripes, that means something, or it meant something to Carlton Fisk. And he yelled at Deion Sanders, "Run it out." Now, Tapia, in the Toronto game, he ran it out. You can see when he hits the ball, he slumps to his knees because he thought, this was a hittable ball and I didn't get enough out of it. But then he ran. And then turning first base, he ran very fast indeed. You run it out because you never know what is going to happen. So the next time Deion Sanders came to the plate in that game with Chicago, he drew a $sign in the dirt again and said to Carlton Fisk, "The days of slavery are over, man." And Fisk just exploded and went after him. He told him, "There's a right way and a wrong way to play this game, and you're playing it the wrong way." So, shoving and all that, and both of the dugouts emptied. And there was a piece written about this by Thomas Boswell. It called Risk a Relic from Non-Prime Time. Call it the last stand of the dinosaurs. We may never see the like again in any pro sport, so relish it. On a Tuesday night in Yankee Stadium, 42-year-old Carlton Fisk of the Chicago White Sox took 23-year-old multi-millionaire Dion Primetime Sanders of the New York Yankees to the woodshed for not running out of pop-out, and he did it in front of 24,000 witnesses. Fisk said that he blew his stack, causing a bench-clearing brawl, so Lou Gehrig could stop spinning in his grave. He did it to honor what the Yankees once were and to take a stand against what they and many in sports have become, a carnival of slipshod me-firsters. Fisk says, laughing, that he also did it for truth, justice, and the American way. You wonder if he's kidding. Fisk is profoundly anachronistic, and proud of it. He's out of step with the times, and the times better watch out. It's not just that he has caught 1,990 games, the most in American League history. It's not just that he stays at the park every night to lift weights for an hour and a half after the game. It isn't even that his starchy New England upbringing makes him seem like an endangered species of player. So you can find this contretemps at many places on the internet. And so I found one version of it on YouTube, and I was rather surprised to see all of these people coming to Sanders' defense. And again, it must have been racism. Oh, really? Is that the way that the way Sanders acted? Is that the way that Ernie Banks would have reacted, or Willie Mays, or Roberto Clemente, or Bo Jackson? No. All of those men, they respected baseball. But Neon Dion thought he was bigger than the sport. And oh no, see, the black players, they play baseball differently. Do they? And it's all about fun. Well, yeah, sure, you can have fun playing baseball. But once again, you know what the funnest thing about playing baseball is? Winning. I'm reminded of a scene from King of the Hill, where Dale's son, who's not really Dale's son, becomes the quarterback of the football team. And one of the fans, he's quite good. And one of the fans leans over to Dale and says, you know what? Your son reminded me of what I like about football. Winning! Yeah. Yeah, you want to win. And you want to run out those grounders. You know? You want to run out the grounders because, once again, you don't know what's going to happen. And to have a baseball player, for the storied franchise of the Boston Red Sox, just confessing to reporters that, no, he's not going to run it out on the field, but he is going to fake it from now on. He was in the lineup the next day, which was amazing to me. And the Red Sox lost that game, and they lost yesterday's game to the Blue Jays. They got swept. There were apparently people in Boston making comments along the line that something in the Red Sox broke on Friday. Let's go back to the chat. Just give me a second here. Here we go. Tarot Destroyer, Gunsmoke, TV 1955 to 75, Marshal Matt Dillon's 54 bullet wounds, locations and times hit, left arm shoulder 26, torso 13, right arm shoulder 7, right leg 4, head 5, left leg 2, other 2. The Western that what Chuck Connors was in, I don't know that I've ever seen an episode all the way through. But it seems like that guy gets thumped in every episode, seriously hurt. And he's also, I think every episode someone tries to kill him. And his son is menaced in almost every single episode. It doesn't seem like a very happy childhood for that poor boy. And again, back to the chat. Ola Berlinski says, according to the annual plastic surgery procedural statistics report by the American Society of Plastic Surgeons, men accounted for 40% of all breast reduction surgeries in 2015. Oscar Toe says, Kevin, did you see Gurriel Jr. make the first baseman miss the tag? Yes, I did. I also saw 3 members of the Red Sox just ahead of, not far from the pitching mound, watch a towering fly ball fall and fall and fall, and it fell between the 3 of them with not one calling for the ball. Not one of them called for the ball. And they were other very, very bad plays made by Boston. Of course, what was it, earlier this year? You had a rundown after the man at the plate hits it, and then he didn't make it to first base. Of course, that's an automatic out. And then he started running towards home plate from first base. And I thought, are there Major League Baseball players now who literally do not know the rules to the game? Billy Martin took Reggie out for not hustling. And I read that after Yogi Berra did not run one out, he got a death stare from Joe DiMaggio and never did that again. Don Willis says, Randy the Freak Moss also made comments like Dion, not a popular. Your mom says TV Land only plays the color episodes. Kevin, on King of the Hill, do the kids attend Tom Landry High School? I think it's Tom Landry Middle School that they attend. The Rifleman, yeah. What is up with the Red Sox? Again, the manager sticking up for a player who's not trying. That has to be demoralizing for the rest of the team. Oh, yes. Thank you for your kind words, Anne. Yes, I was looking at old baseball clips over the weekend and the George Brett pine tar incident. And I noted on Twitter that I rate anger on a scale from 1 to George Brett. I've never seen an angrier man in my life. It took like 3 men. 2 players and 1 umpire to keep him, from punching out the umpire who called him out. Don Willis says Carlton Fisk was a champ. And anyone new here? Bob Denver said that his character's name on Gilligan's Island was Gil Egan. Yeah. Morgenthau, related to FDR's Treasury Secretary, asked Emmett Kelly's Earth. He was his son, I believe. And he stuck around forever. As Kevin says, Central Park 5 case is infuriating, says Popcasso 88. Yes, indeed. Baseball has been very, very good to me, says Emmett Kelly's Earth. Okay. Let's go back to Tainter and his collapse of complex societies. A conflict, contradictions, mismanagement. It was argued earlier in this chapter that peasant political action is less likely to occur under a high but static tax load than in a situation where a high tax load is yielding a perceptibly declining return to the local level. In such a situation, inequity becomes obvious. Similarly, class conflict is more likely a matter of a failing than a rising marginal return. In the former situation, individuals and groups position themselves to reap a maximum share of a shrinking economic pie. In a case where the marginal return is rising, class conflict may be forestalled by creating the impression that opportunity for improvement exists for all classes. Cases where elites behave irrationally require explanation. Irrational behavior by itself explains little of history. Service made the astute observation that the success or irrationality of elite behavior is probably a function of circumstance-induced perception. Rulers simply look good during successful periods and vice versa. Yes, it was decades ago I observed that, and this is pretty much an iron law, that in politics it's not really a question of how good you are, but how bad your opponent is. The biologist Garrett Hardin once pointed to a disarmingly simple lesson of systems analysis that has powerful implications. We can never do merely one thing. His point was that good intentions are virtually irrelevant in determining the result of altering a large complex system. With the feedback relationships inherent in such a system, one can almost never anticipate the full consequences of any alteration. The same principle applies to misbehavior. Elite mismanagement can only be partly responsible for the evolution of any complex society. I do not wish to suggest that leadership is immaterial, only that it is of much less importance than many believe. Complex societies do not evolve on the whims of individuals. Circumstance induced perception is likely to be of greater consequence. Rulers look good when the marginal return on investment in complexity is rising, for in such a situation, almost anything a leader does is overshadowed by the large payoff to society wide investment. Conversely, when marginal returns are declining, there is usually very little that leadership can do in the short term to arrest the trend. And so anything that is tried is bound to appear incompetent. Of course, I would argue that certainly doesn't apply to Joe Biden and the leaders of Western Europe with regard to Russia and energy. Social dysfunction. This vague theme is somewhat diverse, but its central concern seems to be with mysterious internal processes that prevent either integration or proper adaptation. Little understanding is gained by such ethereal notions. Much more would be learned by focusing on the costs and benefits of adopting complex social features. Mystical. The mystical theme is difficult to incorporate under any scientific approach, but some of the individual studies grouped under this theme can be subsumed under the principle of declining marginal returns. David Stewart, for example, asserts that complex societies experience cyclical oscillations between more and less complex forms, which he labels powerful and efficient. The mystical nature of Stewart's formulation emerges when he cannot account for these oscillations, except to liken complex societies to insect swarms and suggest that they burn out. Why do Stewart's powerful societies revert to efficient ones? The answer is most likely that they do so because, as complex societies, they experience a declining marginal return on investment in complexity and so become liable to collapse. Many of the scenarios under the mystical theme rely on the growth and senescence analogy or on such value-laden concepts as vigor and decadence. In one way, these scenarios are like the elite mismanagement theme. Societies are rated by their success at dealing with circumstances or at expansion. Societies able to do these things are considered vigorous, and those unable, decadent. Circumstance-induced perception is a major factor in these assessments. A society experiencing high marginal returns on investment in complexity is likely to be capable of expanding or of containing stress surges and will appear vigorous and growing. A society in the phase of declining marginal returns is likely to be less capable in these matters and so appear decadent. The concepts of growth, senescence, and vigor, decadence are vitalistic and subjective. Such value-laden terms and related concepts are best dropped from use. The observations on which they rely, however, can be subsumed under the principle of marginal returns. Moral weakness, whatever that may be, is more likely to be ascribed to a society experiencing declining than increasing marginal returns. Moreover, as Borkenau has noted, moral crimes are committed all the time by both vigorous and decadent societies. Chance concatenation of events. Chance concatenations cannot explain collapse, except where combinations of deleterious circumstances impinge on a society already economically weakened. Economic explanations. The themes that unite economic explanations are declining advantages to complexity, increasing disadvantages to complexity, and or increasing costliness of complexity. Such ideas are clearly subsumable under declining marginal returns, and indeed this principle provides the global applicability previously lacking in economic explanations. On a more general level, this principle unites both internal-external theories of change and conflict integration models of society. Declining marginal returns are an internal aspect of any society following their own dynamic pattern. This pattern is based on the propensity to choose less costly organizational solutions before more costly ones. Yet changes in organizational solutions and marginal returns often result from the need to respond to changing external conditions. Conflict and integration theories are also subsumed, for whether a people are the beneficiaries or the victims of complexity, it is necessary to take into account the cost-benefit ratio of organizational investment. Neither benign nor repressive regimes can long endure a siege of declining marginal returns. although repressive regimes may be able to endure somewhat longer. The principle of declining marginal returns is indeed then capable of incorporating these various approaches to collapse, or at least the more worthwhile parts of them. It provides an overarching theoretical framework that unites diverse approaches, and it shows where connections exist among disparate views. It seems from this discussion that a significant range of human behavior and a number of social theories are clarified by this principle. And I'll have more from Tainter and his thoughts on contemporary conditions on my live stream tomorrow. And mask people. Don't you just love them? Oh, before I talk about masks, a story from Bloomberg News yesterday, monkeypox proves elusive foe. Again, with the pathetic fallacy, as WHO sounds alarm on global spread. Yeah, you're not going to tell homosexual men, to stop going to orgies or stop having sex several times a week with strangers, because that would be homophobic and offensive. William Briggs comments on something I talked about last week. No convincing evidence that depression is associated with or caused by lower serotonin concentrations of activity. There's bound to be a huge fight in ending the prescription of SSRIs, from Eli Lilly, which makes Prozac, Pfizer, which makes Zoloft, GlaxoSmithKline, which makes Paxil, Forest Labs, which makes Lexapro, and Celexa, and others. This is why. Fortune Business Insights says that the global market size was $11.7 billion in 2019 and is projected to reach $18.3 billion in 2027. That's too much to give up easily. Bound to be a lot of the science thrown at Moncrief and his study, and not just by pharmaceuticals. We all know what Mark Twain said about the patience of quacks. We haven't had any time to see how the older educated women will take these results, but we do know their behavior in other medical areas. And there is a tweet here from Zoe Daniel, who's a member of the Australian Parliament. I tweeted this yesterday and have been avalanched by trolls, so have deleted to stop that thread and am reposting. I support vaccination, and I had my 4th dose yesterday. Trolls, you won't change my position with bullying and abuse, so go elsewhere. And there's a picture of this woman staring at the camera, and she's wearing an enormous mask, and she's got glasses on top of that. Very strange effect. Briggs asks, honestly now, do you think this kind of woman is going to give up her happy pills based on evidence and argument? One last thing, the authors did not discuss the side effects of SSRIs, including those deleterious effects from stopping taking them. So it's not the only way the pills might not work, but they might do more harm than good, and it certainly seems that way. Briggs also mentions the fact that some of these pills in the contraindications are the various thing the pills are supposed to be fighting. Suicidal ideation, as they say. Oh, so you're going to prescribe a pill that makes people want to kill themselves? From 2009 to 2010 to 2017, 2018, the percentage of adults who used antidepressants increased among women, but not men. And it's educated women who pop the most. So whenever I want a good laugh, I go to Bruce Arthur's Twitter feed. He used to be a jock sniffer for the Toronto Star, but now he writes about weightier matters. And wear a mask. Keep panic alive. And some woman was talking about how Asians, they love to wear masks. And you go to an Asian grocery. Yes, Lorraine Lamb tweeted, I'm at TNT, an Asian grocery store. Basically, 98% of customers and staff are masked. Well done, my Asian fam. Yes, we all want to become submissive mass. That's what we're looking for. She responded, the sheep comments are funny. The racist ones are unsurprising. Point, Many Asian cultures are ones of collectivity. Yeah, that's one way to put it. Before COVID, masking was common. If one fell sick, they masked to keep others safe. An others-centered mindset. Imagine if we lived this for all things. Yeah. I'm talking about a culture. You've seen the video. A Chinese woman runs over someone with a car, and it's an accident, and then she goes back and keeps running over the person to make sure that he's dead. And apparently, this is explained by Confucius, because this injury constitutes a tear in the fabric. And so, but if the person is dead, then monetary compensation can be made to the family. And there's all these people saying that, I only shop at Asian stores because everyone is masked, and masked. I guess, one likes one's biases to be confirmed. This is from Kane at Citizen Free Press. Member of the European Parliament, Christine Anderson, quote, "The vaccine campaign will go down as the biggest scandal in medical history. Moreover, it will be known as the biggest crime committed on humanity," unquote. Well, that's pretty definitive. And more on this subject. Let's go to Eugipius and his Substack. RKI-sponsored corona monitoring study finds 90% antibody prevalence in the German population. Appears to deliberately understate the rate of natural immunity. On March 17th of this year, in a speech before the Bundestag, a German health minister and villain of the blog, Karl Lauterbach, declared that we will first overcome the pandemic in Germany with vaccine mandates, and denounced the unvaccinated for, quote, holding the whole country hostage, unquote. 2 days ago, as Tim Ruhn points out, Lauterbach tweeted a picture of himself in front of a Moderna facility in Massachusetts and announced that many researchers now hope that nasal vaccines will be the way out of the pandemic. The latest blow to the vaccinators, and one of the reasons Lauterbach doesn't want to talk about vaccine uptake anymore, is a reluctant and feeble seroprevalence study co-sponsored by the Robert Koch Institute. The preliminary results of this survey of 11,162 people show that around 90% of Germans had antibodies to SARS-2 at the start of 2022, well before the crest of the first Omicron wave. It is safe to assume that today, effectively every last person in Germany has been exposed to SARS-2 antigens in one way or another. And we'll check in with Alex Berenson. And nothing new there. Nothing new there. And the Daily Skeptic. And just hang on just for a second here. High Court rejects judicial review of children's COVID vaccination, puts government above the law when following the science. Children's hepatitis outbreak culprit found. A scientist identified 2 viruses and blame lockdown for weakening immune systems. And the BBC put on a show called Unvaccinated. Norman Fenton and Martin Neal comment. Before this program was screened on July the 20th, promotional material from the BBC in a newspaper article such as this suggested it was going to be extremely biased and inaccurate. It's based on this publicity material. We already wrote articles first criticizing the claim that only 8% of the UK adult population was unvaccinated, and then highlighting the fact that the publicity material failed to reveal the blatant conflicts of interest the key experts used in the program to convince the 7 unvaccinated participants to get vaccinated. Our pre-screening articles and tweets about the forthcoming program were very widely read, and one of the participants, Nazarin, contacted us to express her serious concerns about the way the program was made and how it might be edited, and to confirm that the participants were indeed not informed of the experts' conflicts of interest. Her subsequent tweets, such as the following, made clear her extreme concerns about the program even before it was screened. I've warned them that if I watch the documentary and I feel misrepresented in any way, I will go to the press with my version of events, with evidence and witnesses. I have evidence of how the debates really went, where we made a comment or asked a question to the presenter, who is called Professor Hannah Fry. And I believe it was last week I introduced you to a woman at the New Yorker called Erin Overbay, who apparently was furious that some years ago, after she boasted to an editor about her success at her job, he said, "Don't get cocky." Yeah, can you imagine? I mean, she was just devastated by this and continues to be. And she's now been fired by the New Yorker, and there are two pictures of her in the story by Ariel Zilber and Alexandra Steigrad. I'm just looking at these pictures of this woman that, if she were a native Indian, her Indian name would be Resting Bitch Face. A staffer at the New Yorker claims she was fired by the magazine after she raised concerns that the publication's workforce suffered from a lack of diversity and from gender inequality. Is every woman in journalism miserable? Erin Overbay, an archive editor at the Condé Nast-owned Weekly, posted a lengthy Twitter thread Monday in which she vowed to file a grievance with the union. She claimed she was scapegoated by the magazine's editors, who blamed her for an error that was inserted into the copy of an article by David Remnick, the publication's editor-in-chief. But a source with knowledge of the situation told the Post that Overbay was fired for a pattern of conduct that was deemed disruptive to the operation of the company and which undermines the journalistic ethics of our magazine. The Post has also learned that Overbay was disciplined for self-plagiarism, or copying and pasting work that had already been published by the magazine and reusing it word for word while presenting it as fresh. Overbay responded by saying that the New Yorker's claims are completely absurd. Condé Nast gave me an award for outstanding achievement in this allegation of poor performance. They're claiming the ludicrous nature of which I described in my Twitter thread last week only came about after I started pressing on diversity and gender equality at the magazine, Overbay wrote in an email to the Post. Well, I'll tell you what. Another one of these people saying, oh, there is not enough ethnic diversity in my profession. Here's what you do. Quit your job and demand that your replacement be a woman of color. If you're not willing to do that, then just shut the hell up. So this woman, decides to declare war on the company she works for and seems shocked that she got fired. Again, last month, the Washington Post fired one of its national political reporters, Felicia Sonmez, after she publicly lambasted the newspaper, failing to sufficiently discipline a male colleague, Dave Weigel, who retweeted a joke that was deemed sexist. And then she started taking on all these other people at the Washington Post and making all these wild claims, and she got canned. And again, it seems to be she was just nonplussed by this. How could they do this to me? And yeah, let's look at the chat, and then I'm going to talk about Emmett Rhodes. And The Sacrament of Abortion by Jeanette Paris or Paris. It is not immoral to choose abortion. It is simply another kind of morality, a pagan one. That's from Tarot Destroyer. And let's scroll down to the bottom. From Pro Commenter Man. The commitment of government to deal with the population issue is, of course, essential. There are many ways to make the death rate increase. That's from a piece called New Solidarity by Robert McNamara, March 30th, 1981. In many Florida counties, to remove the constitutional power of the elected sheriff, the sheriff department became the sheriff's office within the public safety department. That's from Paula Berlinski. KMG, what do you think of Beavis and Butthead? It says, Yo Mama. I love it. I think my favorite is the episode where they're watching a They can't find anything on TV to watch. They're bored, sort of switching, going through the channels, and they come across PBS, and they see this documentary on Benjamin Franklin, and Benjamin's, Franklin demonstrating the electrical power of lightning. And so they're thrilled by this and seek to emulate Ben Franklin. And so they get a kite and they're running through a park, and immediately the kite gets wrapped around a tree. And one of them, I think it's Butthead, says, "Trees really piss me off." it's just the way he said it. And then, of course, struck by lightning. And I think Beavis is struck by lightning, ends up in the hospital. And, how did you get here? What was responsible for this violence? Was it something you watched on TV or something you heard on the radio? Was it, perhaps, rap music or some shock jock, right? I don't know, maybe. And so they run with that, young boy injured because of toxic television. Very funny. Is the new Beavis and Butthead movie any good? Asked Oscar. I haven't seen it yet. I have seen the clip, which you may have seen, where they're in university and their female instructor tells them that they have to recognize their white privilege. Well, what's white privilege? Well, white privilege means that as a white person, you can do whatever you want and the police won't arrest you. And so they decide to live out the rest of the day doing exactly what they want and telling everyone who's shocked, "Don't you know I have white privilege? This is my white privilege." Beavis and Butthead would be the last two people that I would associate with white privilege. Seem to have a rather benighted childhood. Emmett Rhodes was born in 1950 and died at the age of 70 in 2020. I could say that he was an almost forgotten figure when he died, but he was very much a cult figure, particularly in Southern California, well, the Los Angeles area. He began as a drummer in a band called the Palace Guard. And then, drummers are at the back. They're sitting down. You can't see them. Not very many star drummers, And so he taught himself, to play everything: guitar, bass, piano, etc., etc., etc. And he joined a group called the Merry-Go-Round, which had a regional hit with a song called Live, which was covered by the Bangles on their album All Over the Place. A very faithful rendition. It sounds a lot like the Merry-Go-Rounds. And of course, the Bangles were a big band, and Emmett Rhodes claimed that he got no royalties from this. One of his songs was used in a Wes Anderson movie, and again, he claims that he had to fight to get any money for that. So one of the big problems that Emmett Rhodes had in with the music industry was sexual predation by men. The Merry-Go-Round were a bunch of teenagers. And Emmett Rhodes himself, Rhodes was a victim of this predation or attempted predation on many occasions because he was a good-looking, handsome, you could say even a pretty young man. He was very outspoken about this in interviews. And as far as I can tell, those interviews where he describes the sort of thing that went on and names have been removed from the internet. So Emmett Rhodes got a $5,000 advance from the record company ABC Dunhill, and he bought recording equipment with it, and set up a studio in his garage. And he proceeded, I suppose like Paul McCartney did in 1970, to make an album doing everything. Playing all the instruments, producing, engineering, doing all the vocal parts. And it is really beautiful, beautiful stuff. He was called the one man Beatles, and I would recommend a couple of records. There is the Emmett Rhodes recording, which was released in 2009, which contains his album The American Dream and the album Emmett Rhodes, Mirror and Farewell to Paradise, plus a single as well. And to, I suppose, wrap it up, there is the definitive collection called Listen, Listen of the Merry-Go-Round. And, well, I mean, Emmett Rhodes wrote nearly all the songs for that band. It played many different instruments. What kind of music is it? I suppose you could call it, Anglophile or sunshine pop is a term that is used when referring to Emmett Rhodes' music. I'm going to read from the liner notes of the aforementioned collection. Listen, Listen. The liner notes are by Scott Schinder. Emmett Rhodes' story is a very sad one indeed. Among the underappreciated cult legends that populate the margins of contemporary popular music, the story of Emmett Rhodes remains one of the most compelling, both for the quality of his music and for the sense of unfulfilled potential that inevitably haunts any discussion of Rhodes' career. In 1970, when ABC Dunhill Records issued his eponymous solo debut, the 20-year-old Emmett Rhodes seemed destined for mainstream stardom and long-term musical greatness. But bad business advice and questionable choices would soon derail the artist's career, causing him to abandon music making after a quartet of solo albums. Rhodes' abrupt exit from the public eye is ultimately less notable than the timeless resonance of the music. His 4 albums, 3 of them recorded in the home studio he'd set up in his Paris garage, with the artist producing, engineering, arranging, and providing all the instruments and vocals, offered a genuinely intoxicating mix of sparkling pop soundcraft and thoughtful introspection that hasn't lost any of its freshness in the decades since it was recorded. This collection compiles Rhodes' 4 original solo albums along with a non-LP single released during the same period. In the years since the release, these long out-of-print recordings have taken on a mythic status among power pop cultists. That mystique is to some degree a reflection of the sense of mystery that surrounds their creator. But the real source of the enduring fascination with Rhodes is the music itself. Emmett Lynn Rhodes was born February 25, 1950 in Decatur, Illinois. When he was 5, his family moved to the Los Angeles suburb of Hawthorne, best known in musical circles as the home of the Beach Boys. At 14, he became the drummer in the Emeralds, a local cover combo that soon fell under the spell of the British invasion and reinvented themselves as the Palace Guard. The Palace Guard recorded 3 singles as well as a session backing My Three Sons actor Don Grady and landed a regular gig at the Hullabaloo on the Sunset Strip. By 16, Rhodes was writing songs and leading the Baroque folk rock quartet, the Merry-Go-Round. Signed to A&M Records, the band released a hastily assembled album and scored a pair of regional hits, Live and You're a Very Lovely Woman. Although the Merry-Go-Round never broke through nationally, its 3-year recording history charted Rhodes' rapidly developing skills as a songwriter and sonic architect. After the Merry-Go-Round disbanded in early 1969, Rhodes completed a solo project, The American Dream, to fulfill the band's contractual obligation to A&M. The album combined leftover Merry-Go-Round tracks with new Rhodes recordings cut at A&M's Hollywood studio with A&M staff producer Larry Marks and such notable session players as Hal Blaine, Larry Knechtel, and Don Randy. Although The American Dream was temporarily shelved by A&M, it nonetheless offered an excellent showcase for Rhodes' precocious talents with such tunes as Holly Park, Pardon Me, and the gently psychedelic Merry-Go-Round track Come Ride, demonstrating that McCartney-esque sophistication of his melodies. Having completed his commitment to A&M, Rhodes used his savings to purchase an old Ampex 4-track recording deck, installed his new gear in his parents' garage, and began recording a series of demos that would soon win him a new deal with ABC Dunhill. Having been dissatisfied with some of the American Dream's more cluttered arrangements, he embraced his new level as a one-man band, teaching himself to play a variety of unfamiliar instruments to flesh out the tracks. The first result of the artist's home recording efforts and his generally acknowledged masterpiece was his 1970 ABC Dunhill release, Emmett Rhodes. With My Face on the Floor, Somebody Made for Me, and Live Till You Die were seamless models of emotional forthrightness and flawless, deceptively simple melodic craft. Emmett Rhodes was warmly received by critics and listeners, reaching a promising number 29 on the Billboard charts, with the single Fresh as a Daisy peaking at number 54. Although A&M's belated release of The American Dream in early 1971 undoubtedly confused consumers and cut into sales, the fresh-faced 20-year-old prodigy who'd managed to make a substantial splash with music made completely on his own terms seemed destined for imminent stardom. But Rhodes's initial momentum was soon derailed by events that quickly spun out of control. The artist's ABC Dunhill contract called for him to deliver a new album every 6 months, despite the fact that Emmett Rhodes had taken nearly a year of painstaking studio work to complete. As work on his eagerly anticipated follow-up dragged on past its delivery date, the label suspended Rhodes's contract and sued him for damages of $250,000, an amount considerably larger than what he'd been paid by the company. The situation soon became a nightmare for the sensitive Rhodes, who found that the more he worked, the more trouble he was in. Despite the legal turmoil, Rhodes forged ahead and eventually completed his next album, Mirror. Despite its rushed birth cycle, Mirror featured some of Rhodes's finest songwriting, with Better Side of Life and Golden Child of God achieving Beatlesque perfection, and Birthday Lady and Really Wanted You convincingly adopting a somewhat more aggressive rocking stance. Despite that, Mirror was a commercial disappointment, peaking at number 182 on the Billboard album chart. His next album, Farewell to Paradise, recorded amidst escalating legal disputes with his record company, would take over a year to complete. It was preceded in the marketplace by the 1972 non-album single, Tame the Lion, whose uncharacteristically topical anti-war lyrics were matched by a bracingly assertive arrangement. Released in 1973, Rhodes's third home-recorded album, Farewell to Paradise, incorporated a wider array of instrumental sounds and stylistic influences, with a substantially harder rocking sound than his previous efforts. Just as the album's title and its cover photo of a hirsute, disillusioned-looking Rhodes seem to acknowledge a dream gone sour, with songs such as Warm Self-Sacrifice, See No Evil, and Blue Horizon carried a wistful world weariness that seemed to reflect the emotional toll taken by the artist's career travails. Rhodes' frame of mind was further indicated by his Farewell to Paradise liner notes. If I possess a talent, he wrote, it surely must be patience. Someone said something about the world stepping aside when a man knew what he wanted. I've known for some time, and the world hasn't made it any easier for me. Once again, Farewell to Paradise's musical quality wasn't reflected in its sales figures. After the album failed to reach the Billboard Top 200, a demoralized Emmett Rhodes, who had been brimming with so much promise and momentum just a few years earlier, walked away from his recording career at the age of 24. In 1976, Rhodes took a job as staff engineer, producer, A&R man for Elektra Asylum Records, where he signed Canadian pop artist Bim and produced his 1978 album Thistles. In subsequent years, Rhodes retreated almost completely from the public view, but remained beloved by a devoted core of admirers, including the Bangles, who covered Live on their 1984 album All Over the Place, and filmmaker Wes Anderson, who in 2001 included the Emmett Rhodes track Lullaby in the Royal Tenenbaums. Meanwhile, all manner of legends sprang up around Rhodes, along with periodic rumors of a new release that has, of this writing, yet to materialize. In 1998, he briefly emerged from his decades-long performing hiatus to play a brief set at LA's Poptopia Festival. A 2004 cover story in Los Angeles City Beat found Rhodes running a low-profile recording studio out of the house across the street from the one in which he grew up, recording other performers to pay the bills and accumulating a large backlog of demos and unrecorded songs that remain unheard by his fans. Regardless of whether the world ever sees the release of new Emmett Rhodes music, the enduring brilliance of his musical legacy assures that he is unlikely to be forgotten anytime soon. Emmett Rhodes became extraordinarily bitter about his treatment by the record industry, and it blighted his life. He was just almost grotesquely unhappy, and he alienated almost everyone in his life, including his wives and children. And I know, being a fan going back many years, one kept hearing these stories about how, various people were working with Emmett Rhodes. The Bangles were working with Emmett Rhodes. Richard Thompson was working with Emmett Rhodes. And nothing. Apparently, songs were recorded and then scrapped. But there was one final album from Emmett Rhodes. It was called Rainbow Ends. And a lot of, stars or alternative stars played on the album. Roger Joseph Manning and Jason Faulkner of Jellyfish, Amy Mann, John Bryan, Susanna Hoffs, Nels Klein of Wilco, and many, many others. It's a strange record, Rainbow Ends. I'll tell you why it's strange, because he could have brought that album out, in 1970 or 72 or 74. It's as if time had stopped for him musically at the time that he left the recording industry. It's a rather sad record because he sings a lot about, the disappointment and pain in his life, both personal and professional. But it is quite good, and we're lucky to have it. Actually, if you haven't heard Emmett Rhodes, I don't know, you could go to YouTube and you could find a video that was made for his song Really Wanted You, where you see him playing all the instruments, and it'll give you an idea of what you're going to get from him. Again, a career that was tragically truncated, but we did get some wonderful music from him. And again, I will recommend the two compilations, the Emmett Rhodes recordings, 1969 to 73, and Listen, the definitive collection by the Merry-Go-Round. So those are my thoughts on Emmett Rhodes. Don Willis says, I think spam, porn, and multi-posting are the only things a mod should take care of freedom of speech. There's no reference to... I think Kevin has a little ninja throwing stars on his tie, says Oscar Toe. Oh, Diver the Gnome likes my blazer and says the red tie sets it off well. Well, thank you. That alphabet lit up our chat. I don't think we can withstand another attack like that. I'm sorry, I didn't see it. Hauper says Fairport Convention led off their first album with a hard-rocking cover of the Merry-Go-Round's Time Will Show the Wiser in 1968. Yeah, indeed, and that's the Richard Thompson connection. Oh, okay. There's a dang alphabet taking over the chat, Kevin. Oh, yeah, okay. Okay. Okay, hidden now. There, it's hidden. So that's taken care of. I'm sorry I didn't get to. I can't, I can't read things and really follow the chat at the same time. Pro Commenter Man says, referring to marriages between cousins in the Muslim community, UK's Environment Minister Phil Willis said, if you have a child with your cousin, the likelihood is there'll be a genetic problem. Well, it's not just, because this is generations of cousin marriage. Generations. Were they drinking Hennessy? Asked Oscar Toe. Okay. Is that a reference to hip hoppers who are famously fond of Hennessy? So that's it for today. That's it. I'll be back on the air tomorrow at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern. Thank you all for tuning in. It means a great deal to me. If you would like to make a donation to the live stream, my PayPal account is linked to kevin_grace@hotmail.com. If you are in Canada, donations to the live stream may be made directly via interact@kevingrace@shaw.ca. And as always, I leave you with this. In these days of social atomization and civilizational collapse, I do dearly wish that you, my dear viewers and listeners, manage to forge a genuine human connection to ease the burden. Good night.